Josie, do you think this film, even though it's a historical piece, does it feel especially relevant and pertinent to today, or is that like kind of true of any good story?
Yeah, any story we tell about the past, we're telling about the present, I think. And as a theatre director by trade, I would never approach an old play without thinking it had something to say to the modern world. Otherwise, we're just sort of recreating a museum piece, aren't we?
True. You did say, Josie, that Mary was a character you knew from your work on stage. I wondered, if you could tell me that, as I'm not on camera, and B, whether you meant specifically or more like an archetype or a broader character.
Yeah, so Mary actually is quite a famous character in the world of theatre because, and this is going to sound slightly niche, but actually it's really important, one of the most famous plays in German is a play called Maria Stuart by a writer called Friedrich Schiller, who I think is the first person dramatically in 1800 to imagine a scene where the two queens meet.
Perfect. Did that at all influence what you did when you created your one scene of the two queens meeting?
Yeah, so Beau and I both knew that play because actually I know Beau Willimon, our screenwriter, from the theatre. So we looked at that and actually, there's a big tradition of these two women meeting on screen. Helen Mirren did it in that miniseries that Tom Hooper directed, Vanessa Redgrave, Katharine Hepburn. So it's a bit of a sort of mountain for great actors to climb, this meeting scene. The Schiller scene that I was describing before in this German play is actually much later in the lives of the two queens. So it's days before Mary's execution where he conceives that. This scene in our movie is the climax of the 7 years of Mary's life as a young woman that we follow in Scotland.
Perfect. Well, do you mind again telling me, we discussed it already, but for this next soundbite, that even though it's called Mary Queen of Scots, it does have two great female leads, and whether that was what attracted you to do it from Beau's script, or whether that's something you then amplified perhaps from the script. I'm not sure which way around that went.
So the first version of this script that I looked at didn't have Elizabeth in it, and it was really important for me to pull Elizabeth into our telling of that story, mainly because I think Mary was such a profound influence and obsession of Elizabeth. In some way, this story tells part of how Mary is this key narrative in the creation of the Elizabeth that we know. The Elizabeth we see in this movie, she's only 3 years into her reign, she's cautious, she's legitimately paranoid. People are trying to depose and undermine her, and she has this incredible cousin in Scotland who appears to have all of this confidence, all of this politics, all of this defiance, and I think that Mary's ability to defy and follow her own instincts is something that Elizabeth learned from.
Perfect. And you mind discussing, like, one of the main themes is obviously the cost of power, the price of power, and how obviously one queen makes herself subservient to it and succeeds, and the other one perhaps doesn't succeed in that regard. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
It really is a film about the cost of power, and I think it's a cost that the cruelty of power can exact on people's lives. There is sacrifice in leadership, there is hatred in ambition, particularly in women, even when they have the right to be in that place. It has a corrosive effect. In this film, the lust for it causes people to betray, to assassinate, to actually just on a very human level disrupt the choices that they make with their own identity and their own lives and loves and relationships.
I'm sure every piece of art you create has an impact on you and how you develop as a person. What would you take personally? What did you find affecting about making this film, Josie, on a personal level?
I think that there are... Okay, let me try again. I think there are a lot of period dramas around. It's a very wonderful and a very well-visited genre. I think that what was interesting to me is that not very many women have told the story of these two great women on film, and although in no way do I think that I'm a crowned head of Europe, what I have tried to do is lead things. Like, I've led theatres and I've led rehearsal rooms, and I have, at the beginning of my career, before theatre changed, walked into rooms that were entirely filled with men. I've been the only woman in that presence in the room, and I felt those nerves, that anticipation, and had to discover myself and my own identity as I sort of dropped my shoulders and raised myself up and spoke and tried to lead. And I think that what we really need are stories that aren't only about how strong women can be, but about how difficult it can be to do that and what pressure that puts us under, and our humanity and our vulnerability and the fullness of our identity. And that's what I wanted to show in this movie.